YouTube boxing community. I want to touch on the subject real quick. I was just listening to a couple of videos. Shout out to my boy, True Boxing Fan, D Block Express, a couple other dudes, you know what I'm saying? But I was just listening to True Boxing Fan's video, and he was talking about Keith Thurman, and it made me think and brought me to this point here. Since the beginning of prize fighting, I'm talking before Jack Johnson, and at the mid-century, you know what I mean? We talking early to mid 1800s. Prize fighting has consisted of the one primary thing. It wasn't championships and resumes, none of that shit. And still to this day, it's the same way. And it's drawing power. Any fighter who can draw an audience has leverage in boxing. Now, no matter if you 1-0 or you 100-0 or you 5-50, if you can draw an audience, you have leverage in boxing. If you could put butts in seats, you have leverage in boxing. And that is the main thing that it comes down to. Now we can discuss what we can debate about what brings that about. Why do people want to go see any particular fighter? Now that's up for discussion. But for the most part, primarily it's, over the course of history, we've always known that knockouts help produce interest in boxing. Prize fighting, since it was strictly, some old white hillbilly against some old white hillbilly farmer, it was always about drawing power. Folks who can draw automatically have leverage. Why do you think that this fucking fighter of the decade belt was made? You know what I mean? Because fighters who draw have leverage in boxing. That's all that matters in boxing, is your drawing power. No matter what fucking title you have, it never did. It never did. Now, the association with a title and drawing power was always this. It added to the prestige of a fight if you could draw, and also vice versa. If you could draw, that means that you had to have been winning for the most part, which meant that at some point in time, eventually, you would fight for a title. Floyd Mayweather, obviously a big draw in boxing, so titles don't matter to him. He doesn't need titles for leverage, and you know what I'm saying, to solidify his rankings in boxing. His rankings and place in boxing is solidified by his drawing power. Same thing with Oscar De La Hoya or Amir Khan or any other, high-paid fighter. And and it's funny because I've heard people mention that, folks will say, well, Floyd was the highest paid athlete, being a boxer. All right. I mean, when people make a case for Floyd, whether it be being the best fighter of the year or decade or ever, it's not really a good case, because if you did your history, that's been the norm for a lot of years. Back in the day where there wasn't a whole lot of athletes, at a time where black folks were openly still called nigger and monkey and had to sit on the back of the bus had different drinking fountains and all of that shit. Joe Louis was making 4 or 5 times the money that the most celebrated white athlete at the time was, which was Babe Ruth. He was making 5, 6 times that amount of money, for a fight. I actually witnessed in some records that around 1935, 1936, 37, Babe Ruth was making around $80,000 a year. And Joe Louis, at the time, was getting a couple $100,000 a fight. Even at a time with Joe DiMaggio, his team had won the World Series. He won the MVP and the fucking Sportsman of the Year award. He was only making like $50,000 a year. That same year, Joe Louis was making like $500,000, $600,000 a year for fighting. You know what I'm saying? So, and we're talking about a time where announcers would openly say shit like, even though him being a colored, or he'd openly be called a nigger or a monkey, he was making way more money than, guys that were heavily celebrated and white, may I add. But the thing here is Joe Louis had drawing power. He could draw. Same thing with Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield, and Oscar De La Hoya, and Floyd Mayweather. So drawing power has always been the primary entity for the who's who in boxing. And the one thing that I can say is in close relationship to that is, or correlation with that is, high profile knockouts. When Floyd Mayweather fought Arturo Gatti, his drawing power and popularity skyrocketed. Oscar De La Hoya, when he beat Chavez Sr., knocked him out, popularity skyrocketed. When Evander Holyfield knocked out Buster Douglas, popularity skyrocketed. There's certain factor that goes in with a knockout, and that's another thing that I wanted to touch on, because like True Boxing Fan was saying, mentioning like a pure boxer. Boxing, since its inception, was a sport based on masculinity. It was looked upon as the ultimate display of masculinity. And when it was formed, when the rules were starting to be implemented, it was never for there to be judges and decisions and shit like that. When boxing first started, 2 motherfuckers fought until one person couldn't fight no more. That's just all it was. And eventually they started implementing distances, where it was 50 rounds or 25 rounds. And then the only judge was the referee. Then eventually they started shortening it, adding judges because more fights were going the distance. But even still to this day, no fighter gets as much praise for a decision as a fighter does for a knockout. As most recently, think about Andre Ward. When he fought Froch, his stock went up. When he fought Kessler, okay. When he fought Green, nobody really talked about that shit. But nothing boosted his stock like his knockout win over Chad Dawson. boxing is not necessarily a weird sport. It's not very heavily complicated in politics. You know what I'm saying? Most of the shit is very simple. If you can sell, if you can draw a crowd, you have leverage in the sport. Point blank, period. And that's what it all boils down to. Championships, none of that shit don't matter. It never did matter. That's why they can make so many fucking belts, because they really don't matter. It's just a bargaining chip. It's just some shit that a person uses to try and, they try and use that shit to make a fight more than what it is, or seem more than what it is, for whatever the case may be. But really, the only thing that matters is how many motherfuckers you can get to buy a ticket and sit down and watch your fight, and at the highest price, because Victor Ortiz may be able to sell out the Staples Center in a fight, but could he sell that motherfucker out at the price that Oscar De La Hoya could for a fight? Probably not. And that's where the leverage and drawing power comes in, and it's always been about that. So the reason that I'm making this video, I want everybody to keep in mind, like Dante 6'5" or 5'6". I'm not sure what the digits are behind it, but you know who I'm talking about. He's been politicking for Donaire to fight Rigondeaux, and I completely, totally, 110,000% understand where he's coming from with, campaigning for Rigondeaux Donaire fight. But the fact of the matter is, that shit don't, whether he's earned his shot against credible or worthy opponents don't matter, man. The primary objective in boxing, it's not championships, it's not wins and losses, it's putting butts in seats. That's it. That's the primary objective. The primary goal in boxing is to put butts in seats. Point blank, period. Because not only does the fighter have to get paid, the venue got to get paid, the promoter and the managers and the motherfucking, all the other fucking people, crooked or straight, that are involved in boxing have to get paid off of this shit. So that's all that matters. You know what I'm saying? I want everybody who makes videos, whether it's concerning legacy, who the fuck should be fighting who, why so-and-so ain't fighting so-and-so, that the primary objective is drawing power, which is 100% connected to how much money is made. Point blank, period.